At the height of his power, his criminal empire generated an income of over $100 million a year. Adjusted for today, that's nearly $1.5 billion. More than any sports star, any tech mogul, any entertainer. But this fortune wasn't built on stocks or innovation. It was built on illegal booze, gambling, bloodshed, and fear. And the man at the top was not a CEO, he was a gangster. For a few short years, he was the uncrowned king of Chicago, a beloved celebrity, and a ruthless killer. But what really made him America's most notorious gangster? And how did a man who controlled an army fall not to a bullet, but to a pen? Alphonse Capone was not born into crime. He was born in Brooklyn in 1909 to poor but honest Italian immigrants. His story could have been the American dream. But the streets of his youth were a brutal classroom. He dropped out of school at 14 after hitting a teacher and fell in with the street gangs of the era, like the notorious 5 Points gang. It was here he found his true mentor, a sophisticated racketeer named Johnny Torrio. Torrio saw something in the tough, ambitious young Capone, not just a brawler, but a sharp mind with a talent for numbers and organization. Capone worked for Torrio as a bouncer and bartender in a seedy bar. It was here he received his famous scars after insulting a patron's sister. The man slashed his face with a knife, earning him the nickname he would hate for the rest of his life, Scarface. In 1920, opportunity knocked. The 18th Amendment passed and Prohibition began. Torrio, seeing a golden opportunity, moved to Chicago to build a bootlegging empire and soon summoned his promising protege to join him. Chicago in the 1920s was a city at war, a patchwork of territories controlled by rival Irish, Polish, and Jewish gangs, all vying for control of the lucrative illegal liquor trade. Under Torrio's guidance, Capone learned the business from the ground up. He wasn't just a thug, he was an executive. He organized the breweries, the transportation networks, and, most importantly, the system of bribery that kept the police and politicians looking the other way. The Torrio-Capone operation, known as the Chicago Outfit, became the most powerful force in the city. But their expansion inevitably led to conflict with the violent North Side gang, led by Dion O'Banion. After O'Banion was assassinated in his own flower shop, the war escalated. In January 1925, the North Siders retaliated. Torrio was ambushed outside his home, shot multiple times. Torrio survived, but the attack broke his nerve. He decided to retire, handing the keys to his entire $500,000-a-week empire to his 26-year-old protege. Al Capone was now the undisputed boss of the Chicago Outfit. The bouncer from Brooklyn was now the king of Chicago. Capone's reign was defined by a stunning paradox. He was a brutal crime boss, but he was also a beloved public figure. He cultivated an image as a modern-day Robin Hood. He spent lavishly on custom suits, diamond jewelry, and his armored Cadillac. He was a regular at opera houses and sporting events, where the crowds would often give him a bigger cheer than the performers or athletes. During the Great Depression, he opened one of the first soup kitchens in Chicago, feeding thousands of unemployed men and their families every day. To many, he was a benefactor, providing jobs and charity when the government could not. But behind the carefully crafted image was a chilling reality of violence. To maintain his empire, Capone waged war. The streets of Chicago ran red with the blood of his rivals. This war reached its horrifying climax on February 14, 1929. Capone, wanting to eliminate the remnants of the North Side gang, now led by George "Bugs" Moran, orchestrated a plan of stunning brutality and deception. 4 of Capone's men, 2 dressed as police officers, entered the garage where Moran's gang was waiting for a shipment of whiskey. They lined 7 men against a wall. It wasn't an arrest, it was an execution. Over 70 rounds of machine gun and shotgun ammunition were fired into the men. It was a professional, merciless slaughter. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre horrified the nation. Capone, vacationing in Florida, had a perfect alibi, but everyone knew who was responsible. He was no longer a roguish celebrity. He was public enemy number one. The massacre put immense public pressure on President Herbert Hoover to take Capone down. The federal government launched a two-pronged attack. The first prong was led by Prohibition agent Eliot Ness and his team of hand-picked, incorruptible agents, nicknamed the Untouchables. They conducted high-profile raids on Capone's breweries, disrupting his operations and generating headlines. But while Ness's war was visible, the truly fatal attack was invisible. It was being waged not with guns, but with ledgers and pencils. The Treasury Department tasked a quiet, methodical accountant named Frank J. Wilson with a simple goal: prove Capone had an income and then prove he never paid taxes on it. It was an incredibly difficult task. Capone never had a bank account, never signed a check, and conducted all his business through fronts and cash. There was no paper trail. Wilson's team spent years digging, following the money. Their big break came when they discovered a ledger from one of Capone's gambling houses that not only detailed the income, but had a note mentioning payments to Al. In 1931, the federal government indicted Capone on 22 counts of income tax evasion. The man who had gotten away with murder was about to be tried for not paying his taxes. Capone was confident he could beat the charges. He had the best lawyers money could buy, and had a list of the potential jurors whom his men were busy bribing and intimidating. But at the last minute, in a stunning move, the judge announced he was swapping the jury with one from a different trial. Capone's jury tampering was useless. His face for the first time showed a flicker of fear. On October 17, 1931, Capone was found guilty. He was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, the longest sentence ever handed down for income tax evasion at the time. He was eventually transferred to the new maximum security prison on Alcatraz. Here, his money and influence meant nothing. He was just prisoner AZ-85. His health, already ravaged by untreated syphilis he contracted as a young man, deteriorated rapidly. The disease attacked his brain, reducing the once sharp criminal mastermind to a confused, childlike state. He was released after 8 years, a broken man. He died in 1947 at his home in Florida, his empire long gone. So what is his legacy? Capone didn't invent organized crime, but he perfected its corporate model. He became the ultimate symbol of the lawlessness and contradictions of the Prohibition era. He was a product of his time, a brutal opportunist who seized a moment when the law itself created an empire for him to rule. His story is a timeless American cautionary tale about fame, violence, and the corrupting nature of absolute power.